Okay, Sarah, it's really interesting how Maurice shot his video with this such a cinematographic look. Did you ask yourself how this could have been possible?
Yes, we loved Maurice and Katya's cinematography and wondered how they were able to shoot such beautiful images being on top of erupting volcanoes. So it's one thing to set up that shot just anywhere, but to do so in such rugged terrains and such a dangerous landscape was baffling to us. But we knew that they loved what they did so much that they really did take the time to set up the right shots. That they truly wanted to get as much coverage as possible to document the phenomenon, but also as an illustration of the thing that they loved most. But they trained for a long time. Some of their colleagues early on were really excellent cinematographers as well, and helped them to set up their shots. So they had some support, but it is incredible what they were able to do.
Mhm. And in the archive footage, often people refer to Maurice as the great volcanologist and to Katia as his wife. And it's really interesting because it's something really current. Is this something you reflect on while you were in the editing process? Is something you notice?
Yes, definitely. It was infuriating to us to see Maurice being celebrated as this world famous volcanologist and Katya being framed as his accessory or just his wife, where she was, of course, just as much of a volcanologist, just as much of an artist, a photographer, and a science communicator as he was. She didn't like being on camera as much, so she would kind of step back from the limelight at times. But the fact that she was such a pioneer and wasn't given that same kind of elevation was very frustrating for us. So we have been very heartened since the film has come out from a lot of women scientists who have written to us and have said, "Oh, Katya was a hero of mine as a child. Katya is the reason I went into geoscience." So we're very happy that she, of course, is being celebrated now. But it is she was up against tremendous sexism as a woman in science as she was going through the years.
And I would like to know how Miranda July was involved, and in your opinion, what she brings to the project.
Miranda got involved kind of later on in the process. Because we at first thought we wanted a French narrator for the film. But one of our executive producers at Sandbox Films had worked with her as a consultant in the past and mentioned her in a brainstorming session when we were trying to figure out who our narrator would be. And everyone on my team instantly said, yes, so we would love Miranda. She's an artist whose work has spoken to me for many, many years. And we were particularly excited to work with her because we wanted our narrator to feel inquisitive and curious and to be asking questions rather than to be possessing all the answers. It's such a common kind of trope in documentary to have a narrator who has all the facts and can tell you exactly what is happening. But instead, that kind of voice of curiosity was important to us because Katia and Maurice were these curious scientists who were constantly searching. Mm-hmm. So we thought that Miranda could infuse kind of her voice with that kind of searching and yearning quality. Miranda is also just so playful and so wise. And we wanted a voice that could be playful like Maurice and Katia as well, bring humor into it. And she's just such a talented actor in that way. And so it was such a joy to get to work with her on the narration.
And it's funny because talking about Miranda July, when I saw your documentary, I thought about Mike Mill's work, especially beginners,
Yeah.
how you work visually. And I would like to know if you have some visual references when you start working on this project.
Actually, Beginners was one of our references. We watched so many love stories. Just did a ton of watching of romantic films. We wanted to really ground the film in the aesthetic of the French New Wave, actually, because that was what formed the cultural landscape when Katia and Maurice were themselves growing up. And those kinds of aesthetics from the French New Wave show up in their own work. And so that was a big influence on us. So we watched, like Jules and Jim, Masculin and Feminine, all kinds of Godard and Varda and Truffaut films. But there's a lot of contemporary romantic films that also kind of locate their influences in the French New Wave. For example, Y tu mamá también was a huge reference for us, as was Beginners. And we were really looking for styles of films that worked with stories of love triangles, like Y tu mamá también. But also with playful versions of narration. And we loved the narration in Beginners, and we loved the narration in Y tu mamá también. So those became references. But Beginners was particularly influential for us of how Mike Mills relates to his personal archives. And that helped us because we had all these pieces, of Katia and Maurice's life. And we did as much research as possible. We read all their books. We watched tons of, we watched all of their footage. We interviewed people who knew them and loved them. But still, we were trying to make sense of the materiality of what they left behind. And so that's how we kind of developed that voice in the film of, we have this photo, we have this, but there are pieces of their story lost at time. That was something that Beginners kind of helped us formulate a similar kind of language that could call out the materials that we were working with for the film.
And how did you work on the sound? Because the footage was silent, but your documentary is full of sounds and music also.
Yeah, so my editors, Aaron Casper and Jocelyn Chaput, they are the hardest working and most diligent people. They rebuilt soundscapes for all of the 16 millimeter footage that Katia and Maurice shot. Of course, there was footage that we worked with that was like from television programs that did include sound, of them talking, of their interviews. So luckily that none of that was rebuilt, but Katia and Maurice's own footage, Aaron and Jocelyn rebuilt. They did a lot of research and worked with sound libraries that contained like geothermal sounds and volcanic explosions, and to make sure that the soundscapes felt accurate. But they also were able to work in subjectivity into the soundscapes too. It was important for us to kind of create an immersive world that felt true to Katia and Maurice's lived experience and their perception of volcanoes. And since they would often talk about volcanoes as like these alive beasts, so to speak, my editors would kind of play with sound in that way. For example, they would sometimes, there was one scene where Aaron worked in dinosaur sounds to add this texture of monstrosity. And you couldn't actually tell that it was, a snarling lizard, but there was just like this subtle subjective dimension to it that felt true to their lived experience of perceiving volcanoes as these monsters. But we also had an amazing post-production sound team that we worked with. A man named Patrice LeBlanc was our sound designer, and Gavin Fernandez was our re-recording mixer. And they really elevated the work that Jocelyn and Aaron did in the edit to make it multidimensional and powerful in that way.
And how important was for you that nature was one of the main characters of this movie? Because it's really funny that at the beginning of your documentary, volcanoes starring as main characters as Maurice and Katia.
It was very important that volcanoes were the third character in the film. So we wanted the film to be a love triangle between Katia and Maurice and volcanoes. That was something that Maurice wrote in one of his books. That actually, there's a line that appears at the very end of the film where Maurice says, "For me, Katia and volcanoes, it is a love story." But once we read that sentence in Maurice's book, that was the kind of the genesis point of the film for us. We thought, okay, Maurice is telling us his story for his life is it's these three loves together. And because of that, we needed to make sure that volcanoes had personality and depth, but also that they couldn't necessarily be lumped into certain categories. Maurice very memorably says in the film that you can't really classify volcanoes. Each one has their own moods, their own personalities. And that was something that he and Katia just absolutely loved. Every volcano, they they met, they seems like they had a relationship with. They would try to understand like how that volcano lived and functioned and what their moods and emotions were. So it was really important for us to be led by their example and to try to work that into the film as well.
A line in the movie says that curiosity is stronger than fear. Do you think this is the key to live life fully, as Maurice and Katia did?
It's a great question. That's a really great question. I think for Katia and Maurice, it certainly enabled them to live the life that they wanted to lead, which was living life on erupting volcanoes, and they needed to reconcile fear and be guided by curiosity in order to do that. But I do think something just living life through the pandemic has certainly gotten me in touch with deeper fears, and I've been trying to be guided more by curiosity or to understand fear. And I've got to say that having that as that sentence as a guide has been very liberating for me. Not to try to have no fear, but rather to see the relationship between curiosity and fear, and to choose curiosity while still learn from what fear might teach me. So I'm very grateful for them for providing that mantra, so to speak.
And Fire of Love has been already released in some countries. And I would like to know if you had the chance to confront yourself with the audience. And if yes, which are the emotions that you notice your documentary brings out?
It's been really wonderful to travel with the film thus far as we've released the film around the world. Just on a personal note, it makes me really happy to think that Katia and Maurice, they used to tour the world with their images of volcanoes, speaking at conferences, introducing people to their work. So it makes me really happy to think that people are seeing their images around the world once again. But engaging with audiences, I've been really pleased with the reception thus far. People seem just absolutely surprised by how close they got, and that these two people could actually do something so bold and survive so long doing the kind of work that they did. But it's also been really interesting to see people kind of connecting to the deeper existential questions that the film raises about how do you live life when any moment could be your last? How do you make sense of being a human in the scope of the vastness of our planet and the enormity of geologic time, so to speak? Those kinds of questions about meaning and existence are ones that people seem like they want to talk about most. Then people always have questions about Katia and Maurice's relationship. They want to know more. But there's also a lot of people who have said that there's part of them that likes the mystery of not knowing more. And for us as a filmmaking team, that the archive itself was so spectacular, but it was also very limited. There was a lot that we could never know. And so we ourselves always felt like an unrequitedness, a longing to know more, but we had to accept the mystery because Katia and Maurice they're no longer with us. So we can celebrate what we do know and also celebrate the mystery. But it's been fun to have those conversations with our audiences as well.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you.
Thank you